duties in the chair. As you know, the draft island planning strategy went back to Cabinet to consider by a decision of full council. Ordinarily 28 days would have to be given, 28 days notice for that, but wasn't the time to give that notice because full council had sent it back sooner. So I'm just required to give that announcement. You all know then, obviously, the island planning strategy went back to full council and was approved. So slightly historic. Item number 2, minutes of the last meeting held on the 12th of March 2024. Do I have agreement to sign those minutes? All those in favour? All those against? Abstentions? So that's carried. I'll sign those minutes. Item number 3, declarations of interest. Are there any? No. Item number 4, public question time. We haven't had any written questions. There's no one in the gallery, but I understand, Councillor Jarman, you've got a question to read out from a member of the public. So please go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This was raised at the Save the Military Road meeting at Isle of Wight Pearl on 28th of April 2024 from table 3. The question is, when will the upgraded consultant report agreed in the February 2024 budget regarding options to save the military road, specifically the Chell to Freshwater Bay section, be available?
I suspect you'll need a written response for that. I don't know if there's anyone in the room who wants to say something. Yeah.
Oh, I'm Michelle Love, the new Service Director for Highways and Community Protection. Sorry, what was the question? And I'll do my best to answer it.
Yes, please. Thank you.
The question is, when will the upgraded consultant report agreed in the February 2024 budget regarding options to save the military road, specifically the Chell to Freshwater Bay section, be available?
So there are papers online. It came to Neighbourhood and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee last Thursday. So the most up-to-date information can be found on the website related to that scrutiny meeting on Thursday, the 2nd of May. The consultants, there is a working group being formed, and that is currently looking at 3 options. So when those options have been agreed, then obviously we will update the information. So the answer, I guess, in summary, is the most up-to-date information is available, and as soon as that changes, we will make that available to members.
Thank you. Chair, could I, given it was a question from the meeting, and could I ask that that written answer is sent back to them, because I don't want to be the messenger all the time. And I think Councillor Nick Stewart is the one who is managing that process and that Save the Military Road convening of their meetings, and indeed of the new committee they've just formed. So routing it through him might be appropriate.
Yeah, if you can hand that note over. Does it have the name of the member of the public on it, or? Okay. Thank you. Don't think there are any more public questions. So we'll move on to agenda item 5, progress update, pages 13 to 14. Fortunately, Councillor Jones-Evans has given her apologies, is not here, so I can't ask her the now routine agenda item on Kingston Marine Park, which is when we'll get a heads of terms agreement in relation to that project there. I don't know, Alex Minns, you're being pointed out from the room. If you're online and would like have any update on that would be helpful. But don't feel you have to. I'll put you on the spot there. It's the heads of agreement for Kingston Marine Park. Do we know how close we are to getting those heads of agreement signed?
It's being handled by. Can you hear me? First of all, hello.
Yeah, I can hear you. Yes, yes.
Okay, yeah. It has been, they've had some further discussions with the particular group. Property Services are handling the discussions. There's still no further, well, they've done the heads of terms, they have draft heads of terms, and they are working towards a date, but we've yet to confirm a date. It has been somewhat slowed up, I think, as you've possibly been told in the past, by the strikes that they were having in the film industry across the world. But we are advised that we will be getting a date shortly. If
Okay,
that helps.
thank you. Thank you for that. Yeah. Also, the leisure centres review, which is an item that's been here for a long, long time now. Is there anyone in the room or online who can give an update on that?
Well, I can. I'm happy to give an update as it's in my area. I wasn't
Yes,
intending to
please.
come to the meeting, but as I've dialed in for the Ryde Town Board stuff a little bit later, the report is being prepared as we speak. We are going to do an end of year report so we can do the whole of the financial year. So I'm waiting for the financial data to come through with that so that we can bring a report to a future committee. I can tell you at this stage that the figures look very encouraging. The income is back to the levels it was pre-COVID, which is very good news, I think, for any leisure facility across the country. The only issues that we are seeing presently are, as I think we're all aware, we've seen a very large hike in utilities across the course of the year. However, we did get a grant. We applied for a grant for £500,000 from Sport England this year, and we were awarded that. So we don't have a particular issue this year. So the figures look quite encouraging. The only issue for next year is what we think the forecasted utilities are likely to be for the leisure facilities that we manage. We don't yet know that yet. So we're waiting for some work to be done on that. It does look like that the utility bills are going to come down quite drastically, but we haven't yet got a forecast for the full financial year for next year yet. But some quite positive things in there, I think.
Okay. Councillor Quirk.
I understand that the report for the future of the leisure centres has been completed, and I can understand that you want to issue a report on how the leisure centres have come back to their reasonable state of financial affairs at the end of the year. I don't see why one report is actually delayed the other. They're two separate reports looking at two separate things. And it seems that we're just delaying this. It's 2 years ago since the report was commissioned, a bit more probably. And I'm pretty sure that it has been around and kept secret for quite a long while now. And we seem to have this sort of thing of unnecessary secrecy. And I can understand if it's got bad news in it, you want to have the results saying it's better than it was predicted. But I really think they're two separate items, and we should actually get release of the report as soon as possible.
Any further comment on that, Mr. Minns?
Not really. I think the report has been, the information has been there for the entire time. That's the kind of information that's available. Financial performance of the leisure has been there the entire time. The longer, obviously, you wait, the better. It's very difficult to predict what things are likely to end up being in advance. So the longer that you allow things to re-establish themselves, the better quality of report you'll get. I think there was always a view that we wanted to get past the 3 busiest months of the year, which were January, February and March, to give us some decent forecasting. So I think we've got to that stage now. We're waiting for the close of the financial reports, which normally occurs around about the 20th of the month, so around about April. 20th. So we're just waiting for those reports to be finalised, and the report will be ready for your future committee.
Thank you. So item number 6, the committee's work plan, so the forward plan and the work programme. Obviously, our next meeting is in June, and it looks like we've got a good agenda there with cross-Solent ferry operations, pre-decision scrutiny on the adoption of the Newport Harbour Master Plan, supplementary planning document, policy framework annual review, and the quarterly performance monitoring report that would normally come for June, but I understand Cabinet's going to look at that this week. So that's unlikely to remain in our June meeting because Cabinet will have seen that. You can see it there. There's issues on July meeting. I can't identify anything on the council's forward plan that we haven't put on an agenda of interest. Councillor Spink.
Chair, the only matter I would raise, and normally perhaps it wouldn't be something for corporate scrutiny, but is the traffic regulation order review. So the areas of Bryston, Freshwater, Shelfleet, Yarmouth have been reviewed for, in the main, as I understand it, double yellow lines. That's caused a certain amount of consternation in the area that I represent. And I wonder if that could be something we could look at simply as an information exercise, really, and to find what, if any, of the points raised by the community have been taken into consideration.
So that's for a decision on the 13th of June, isn't it?
Yeah.
So you'd want to see that coming before our June meeting.
Well, or at the least the 11th of June, I suppose, would be all right.
Yes, yeah. The committee happy with that to go on the agenda? Yeah, seem to be nods. Yeah, Councillor Churchman.
I'd just like to make the point, just keep painting yellow lines does not solve any traffic problems whatsoever. It just actually creates more.
I was going to say you'll be able to air those views in June, but you'll need to be substituted here, Vanessa, to come back. Fine. Anything else? No. In which case we will move on to item number 7, Ryde Town Board. So when the agenda was put together, we'd envisaged the chair of the board, Stephen Holbrook, envisaged that he would come and make a report to this committee on the progress of constituting the board and putting together the relevant documentation from government. The board hasn't moved forward with great pace, not least of all as of last Monday, so Monday a week ago, the full board hadn't technically been approved by government. So I met with Steve Holbrook last Monday and we agreed that it would be more beneficial for him to come to this committee and make a fuller report in June, by which time many of the documents will be, and the consultation with the public as well, will be in draft form, and he will be in a position to seek views and take questions from this committee. In the meantime, I said I would give a brief report on my conversation with him, and we also have Chris Ward, our 151 officer, in the room, and he has circulated a note which is very helpful actually, and sets out the council's sort of core role behind the town board. But if I just quickly give my summary. So as of a week ago, the board, the board members have been invited to join the board, those successful applicants. A meeting has been held between the chairman and the members of the board, and they met a deadline of, I think, something like the 1st of April in order to provide those names to government. At the moment, it's on hold and they're just waiting approval for the next stage, which will be a small round of funding to then go on and consult with the public and deal with a strategy, a published strategy of how the money is going to be spent, certainly in the early years. I also had a conversation with Colin Rowland, who said that the appointment of the 2 councillors to the board will be dealt with again at full annual council, so next week, as appointments to outside bodies in the normal way. So there would be a vote of full council on 2 councillors that sit on that board. That's probably it from me. I'm going to now invite Chris Ward to maybe summarise his paper, which I think is very helpful, and it might be helpful actually for the town board members to see that, or a version of that note. Mr. Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Conscious that I wasn't asked to prepare a paper, but thought it might help frame any discussion or questions that you may have. So I set out a paper on a few pages, which sets out that clearly it's the town board's responsibility to develop the long-term plan. It's for the town board to develop the vision, the priorities, and the objectives. The role of an accountable body in that there is a body that when you're dealing with public funds needs to take proper ownership, have proper financial stewardship, ensure that there's the proper financial administration around public funds. So in that sense, the Isle of Wight Council is the accountable body in this instance, and they are responsible for ensuring the proper use of public funds. So it's the council's responsibility as accountable body to execute the plan. That's the terminology that's used in the guidance document or the long-term plan guidance document that's been prepared by government. So I reiterate that it's the accountable body's responsibility to execute the plan, to fund it and to execute it. So to provide the funding, because the funding comes from government to the Isle of Wight Council, is held by the Isle of Wight Council. All of the financial transactions will flow through the Isle of Wight Council's accounts, and it will be the Isle of Wight Council as the accountable body that will be responsible for submitting financial returns to central government. I've also taken the opportunity in the paper to set out some best practice around the accountable body function and the accountable body role. You may know that I have this role, or had this role, for the Solent Local Enterprise Partnership. So I have a fair amount of knowledge about what good looks like in terms of assurance around public funds and how accountable bodies ought to operate. There's five principles set out in the paper, and they are the ones that have been determined by our professional body, Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, that they deem to be those principles that should endure through any accountable body relationship. So I'll take those. I'll take those in. I'll take those individually. The first one is for there to be a proper agreement, if you like, and relationship between the Section 151 officer or Chief Financial Officer and the chair of the board to establish what effective governance and controls ought to look like, and so that I can discharge my statutory responsibility for the financial administration of those public funds. There should be the opportunity for myself to be able to report back to that board itself in the event of any concerns that I may have around the use of those public funds. It's also important that when decisions are taken by the board for the use of those public funds, just like they would be in a council setting, that they are properly informed decisions so that they understand all of the both legal and financial implications of any of the decisions that are before them to take. Should be an internal audit plan. So in this sense, most of the guidance that is written by government talks about a light touch approach around assurance, but that equally can be a relatively light touch approach around internal audit. But nevertheless, it would be a useful addition to the process. And also that there are proper procedures around scrutiny and financial assurance. It's also, I think, important to recognise that in the government's expectation, it's written in the guidance as well, and I've reproduced it right at the back of the report. They talk about, in relation to assurance, 3 lines of defence. 2 of those lines of defence are actually me, the Chief Financial Officer. The first one being that I provide that somebody is responsible for the financial administration, And secondly, that I provide written confirmation that all of the necessary checks and the proper administration of the financial affairs have taken place in relation to the programme. And that's something I expect that I would have to complete annually and submit back to government. So I hope that provides you with some information around the assurance framework that would surround the town's fund. But clearly, I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Ward. Councillor Churchman.
Yes, will, we are the authority in charge. In that case, will any of this come before the audit committee? Will it be subject to audit committee scrutiny and of course our annual audit by Ernst Young?
It will form part of the annual audit by Ernst & Young, as will any expenditure of the council, because it will sit within the council's financial accounts. The extent to which you will have any real scrutiny over it will be much more limited. It's supposed to be a light touch framework, and so long as I can provide government with the satisfaction that the proper controls are in place, I think that's what the government would expect. But let's not forget that it's actually the town's board that will be taking all of the decisions on the use of the funds themselves.
Councillor Downer.
Chairman, Mr. Ward, may I ask who actually selects towns to have a town board? Is it a government, or do towns have to apply for it?
There was a government process, and there was an announcement of those towns board, but I think it was undertaken on a more formulaic basis rather than an applications basis. And then the constitution of the towns board, I think, as you've touched on earlier on, is the way the guidance is written. It's for the chair to or the independent chair to constitute their board in whichever manner they feel, but it has to be broadly community led rather than politically led.
Councillor Spink.
Chair, thank you, Chair. I'm not sure this is really a question for Mr. Ward or just a general observation. I, as were a number of members of the council, were concerned when the appointment of the council representatives on the trade board were that item on the agenda was removed from full council, I think on the 20th of March meeting, to the consternation of a number of councillors. I'm also concerned by the failure of Councillor Jordan on that occasion to declare an interest. I'm also concerned by the failure of Councillor Jordan to answer the question who appointed the chair of the board, when in fact, as I understand it now, it was himself together with others in a committee, but he failed on 2 occasions to answer who had done that. And the next day, rather it would seem, in return for having appointed, if I may say so, the chair of the board, Councillor Jordan was appointed as a quid pro quo. Now, I'm extremely concerned that if this committee is going to be open and transparent and deal with large amounts of money, this should be looked at. I thought it was going to be looked at today, but clearly it's not. Would it be looked at, therefore, at the full council, next full council meeting, or will it come before corporate scrutiny before it's too late? I would challenge, for example, whether or not in these circumstances, the inclusion on the board of Councillor Jordan or of the chair has been appropriately made, or should be continued.
I mean, I'm happy to reiterate what I was told in my meeting with Colin Rowland, and Bob Seeley, the MP, was in that meeting Monday a week ago. Colin Rowland said the appointments to the town board will be made by this council at annual council in the normal way when it deals with appointments to outside bodies. So that should sweep up the concerns that you have, councillor Spink, without me commenting on them. Because that would be a fresh set of appointments. So whether councillor Jordan and councillor Lucioni were validly appointed or not at the previous full council meeting, next council next week will make appointments, and that will cure any problems. It may be different councillors are appointed, it may be those same two councillors are appointed, but it will be a matter for a full vote of this council in the normal way to the appointment of an outside body. And that was what Mr. Rowland told me Monday a week ago, and Bob Seeley on an online call.
Will that include, sorry, the appointment of the chair?
No, so again, the appointment of the chair was done through a process where there was an interview panel. The leader of the council was on that interview panel, as was, and I don't have a comprehensive list, but I know the Police and Crime Commissioner was on that panel. I think Mr. Rowland himself was on it. There was more than one interview, more than one applicant, and a decision was made, and an appointment was made, and Mr. Holbrook was that the person who was offered the appointment. From what I've seen, and I've taken quite an active interest, I don't see any issue with the appointment process of chair from what I have seen. Councillor Lever.
Just to clarify on that, so I believe what was just said previously by Mr. Ward was that the guidance is for the chair of the board to constitute their board, but now what we're saying is it will, full council will be doing part of that by putting forward our two representatives.
So this is in relation to the two councillors. So there are certain positions on the board that have to take place. So the Member of Parliament's automatically on the board, the Police and Crime Commissioner or their nominated representative is on the board, and two members of the local authority being obviously the Isle of Wight Council. The council, the paper that was put to full council on the 20th of March set out the criteria, the guidance and comments on the guidance. And that paper said that that full council meeting would elect effectively, the full council would vote for its two councillors. As we know, we were all there. The paper was withdrawn on the last minute. I won't go into the detail of the conversation that was had. Colin Rowland was absent. I think he was on leave at that time. He has reiterated to me very clearly, no, the process should have been council making its appointment because they're councillors, just because they're councillors. The independent chair is free to make his appointments of all the other roles. But I have to say, it's been more than just him from what I've seen. There's been a process. Solent Partners has been involved. There's been an application process. So it hasn't been quite as arbitrary as it might sound from what I've seen. So was there a councillor hand up here before I go to, there was, so I'm just going to go with the committee first. So Councillor Reddraw.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out, I was just looking at the agenda for the next full council, and that's not listed on the appointments, so maybe that's something that we should chase up.
Yeah, I noticed that earlier today, actually, Councillor Spink pointed out, so I will go back and clarify. Yeah, thank you. Somebody's pointed out that Chris Potter, you're possibly wishing to speak.
Thank you, Chair. No, just simply to reiterate that we've taken on board the need to add the issue regarding the selection of representatives, two representatives for the Isle of Wight Council, as you rightly indicated. So there will be amendments to the papers issued so that members can indeed select by majority vote the two Isle of Wight councillors they wish to serve and put forward to the Ryde Town Board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Potter. And I'll just go to Mr. Minns, who's also online with his hand up.
Yes, thank you, Councillor. And yeah, that was a very good update that you gave. I can just tell members as of today, which is a kind of just hot off the press, that DLUC have approved now the next stage of funding for the town board in terms of the revenue funding to set up and do all the public consultation and then to do the next stage of the process. So that's come in today.
Okay, thank you. That's very helpful. Thank you. I'm going to go to Councillor Spink and then Councillor Cook.
Chair, I appreciate that if the agenda for the next meeting of full council is amended, then we will have an opportunity to elect the 2 representatives of the council on the board. But I remain concerned, I have to say, and I do think it's a matter that corporate scrutiny should look into. I remain concerned by the fact that it was removed from the agenda on grounds which now seem to be agreed were not justified, that Councillor Jordan failed to declare an interest, failed to declare that he had taken part in the election process when he was asked who elected the chair. He failed to answer that question on 2 occasions and failed to inform, because he must have known that he was going to be appointed the very next day. I think this is something that corporate scrutiny should be looking at. It's not just a question of who we vote for, it's a question of why were we given that various information by the monitoring officer? Why was it withdrawn? Why is it now being reinstated? In other words, the acceptance of incorrect procedure. And why did Councillor Jordan fail to behave in what I would suggest was an open and transparent manner? Those are all good items, in my view, for corporate scrutiny to consider.
I think, Councillor Spink, they sound more like sort of, inquiries, and I'm not sure this committee is here to sort of conduct an inquiry. I hope the committee is satisfied that however that item was withdrawn from the 20th of March agenda full council, the issues, problems, concerns are now being addressed by bringing it back to annual council for a vote. And if there was anything that wasn't done correctly, whether that, for whatever reason, it will be done correctly, and so the problem will be solved. If you have any concerns around the council leader's conduct, I would suggest it's a matter for you and him, and for you to ask him those questions. But I don't think it's a matter for this committee to set up an inquiry type investigation into.
So be it, Chair, although I did think that you had thought that it was, and that indeed Councillor Jordan was going to attend today. I shall certainly ask him about it at full council, which he may find more embarrassing than if we did it here, but there it is. You can rest assured I'll be asking him.
Fine. Fine. Please do. I think in his absence it would be difficult today anyway, but I'm satisfied that the process that is going to happen next week at full council is the proper one, and therefore if there were any problems they will be dealt with by that vote next week. Councillor Quirk.
You may want to get an opinion from Mr. Potter, but my understanding is that it's inappropriate for allegations of breaches of standards to be looked at by a committee like this. That should go through the monitoring officer. Maybe the monitoring officer would like to confirm that.
Mr. Potter, and then I'll move on to the next question, I think. Mr. Potter.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you, Councillor Quirk. Yes, any allegations of breach of the Members' Code of Conduct, if there are any, have to be in writing and have to be referred to me, at least in the first instance, as indeed any sort of concerns best addressed through that route, which is laid down under the Localism Act 2011. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Cook.
Thank you. A couple of quick questions. First one for Mr. Minns. Good news that it's moving forward, and the news from DLUC. Does this mean that the town board itself is now ratified and can meet? And my second question is for Mr. Ward. The town boards, as we all probably aware, the town board in itself is not a legal entity, so cannot employ staff directly. And at the moment, all staffing is going through Ryde Town Council. I just wondered if there has been any progress on the framework for that and how that's going to work moving forward. Essentially, making sure that we're going to get our money back on that. Thanks.
Sorry, that was a question directed, well, that, I don't know whether it was to Mr. Minns or Mr. Ward, but whoever would like to answer it, please do.
So I thought there were there two questions, one for
The
Mr. Minns
first
and
question
one
was
for
for Mr. Minns, just asking if the news from DLUC means that the town board itself has now been ratified, and can it now meet as an official capacity? Because I'm conscious of time. We've already lost a month, and we've only got to August to get this done. And the second question was regarding staffing and Ryde Town Council's role in that, and how the process for Ryde Town Council to be reimbursed for staffing, and how the finances for that will work, given that the town board is not a legal entity.
Mr. Minns.
Yeah, I think whilst we've heard today that the money has been agreed, we haven't had it fully ratified yet, which is a little surprising, but we're still awaiting that. And obviously we need to appoint the two councillors to the board anyway at full council. So I don't think the full constitution of the committee is quite there yet. But you are very right. We need to move this on at an alarming pace, because all the information has to be in by August. And the longer this goes on, the more difficult it becomes to get that information in on time and back to DLUC.
Councillor Lucioni's waving her hand, so.
It's not really my business, this, but I have had an email saying that waiting for confirmation from DLUC for the membership of the town board, and I firstly want to thank you for your patience. We've now had that confirmation.
Okay, are you saying that's different information to Mr. Minns?
Yes. So Alex, I've had an email saying it has been ratified. Sorry.
Okay, Karen. Well, I haven't had that, so I can discuss that with you. But I think obviously the agreement of the two members hasn't been made yet, has it? So the actual board isn't complete until that's done.
Mr. Ward, is there anything to say on the use of Ryde Town Council staff to support the board?
The one thing I can say with certainty is that we received the £200,000 on Friday just gone, on Friday the 3rd of May. So that is for the development of the long-term plan. There was 50,000 received prior to that. So long as there's agreement in place, there should be no problem in terms of reimbursing whoever's providing the support. But there is obviously within the guidance, it talks about that it would be advisable to have secretariat support for the town board itself. I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to, but where they commission that from is obviously a separate matter.
Yeah, I'd be interested as well about the decision making of who they go to staff and provide support. Why or who would choose to ask for staff from Ryde Town Council as opposed to Isle of Wight Council, but maybe that's not a question that could be answered in this room. Councillor Lucioni.
Because I was at that first meeting, and Donna Jones asked that question, and so it's a temporary thing for the first 3 months, I think it was, and then when whoever revisits that, then they'll look again, because when the money's come through. So it was looked at for a very temporary time, so that the work could happen in the background, ready for coming to the first ratified meeting. I hope that helps.
Thank you. I've had a hand up from Councillor Jarman for a while.
Thank you, Chair. I wonder if the monitoring officer could just clarify exactly what the process is for nominating people to the Ryde Town Board ready for the 15th of May meeting.
I think, see, Councillor Jarman, you just talk about two councillors here. We're clear that that's all we're talking about at the May meeting.
Correct.
Yeah, Mr. Potter.
Just to clarify, it'll be a matter of Isle of Wight councillors to decide on their decision as to who the two representatives would be put forward to be voted to serve on the Ryde Town Board. So in effect, it's in members' hands as to who they wish to nominate and who they actually agree upon. Thank you.
So nominations on the night and a vote at the meeting, Mr. But there's no formal nomination process.
So
what you were
am I
getting at?
correct there that any councillor can nominate any other councillor?
Indeed.
Yes. Yeah. Councillor Churchman.
Yes, I'm just concerned about the town council and the town board. Is there actually a set thing, Mr. Ward, whereby the town board has to be separate from the town council? It has a division been indicated, because I find it a little bit worrying if you start mixing the two, whether it's staff or finances or anything else. To me, the town board is there for one reason: to spend £10 million. And I'm concerned if there is an overlap between the council, the Ryde Town Council and Ryde Board. Thank you.
Yeah, the town board and the town council are entirely separate. And I'll read an element for you from the guidance. It says town boards should be community-led institutions that build civic capacity in the town, with the local authority or an alternative organisation such as a community group providing a secretariat function. The local authority will act as the accountable funding body. It goes on to say, we encourage local authorities to help empower the town board in realising this role and driving forward a community-led vision for change. This may include providing advice and support on legal duties like impact assessments to help leaders with non-public sector backgrounds navigate those requirements they may be less familiar with.
Chair, may I just come back and say thank you, because that states quite clearly the position so that everybody here and the public now know exactly how it should operate. Thank you.
Thank you. We shall move on, but one more question from Councillor Spink.
Just of Mr. Ward, if I may, thank you for that. I'm slightly confused because you can be both a member of the board and a member of the town council. So the separation is not in the sense of personnel necessarily.
I can only comment, that's true, but that's the same of many organisations. But that is true.
I accept that, but in saying that the two are independent of each other, if they contain the same personnel, they're not as such independent. I just wanted that clarification.
Okay, that just as there are for council meetings, for example, there's proper requirements for registering interests, if necessary, recusing yourself from matters that would be on agendas, and they have to follow the same governance regime as if it was a normal council meeting that you would be familiar with.
Thank you. We will move on. Item number 8, pre-decision scrutiny, draft health contributions, supplementary planning document, pages 35 to 72. We've all had the opportunity to read those. Are there any comments on them? Councillor Quirk.
In principle, it all looks very sound. I don't have any objections in principle. However, the way that it's funded, the calculations I do have a problem with. It's assuming that every property has 2.09 residents. That applies to one of the properties we recently approved in Bembridge that go for £950,000, 5 bedrooms, or with a 1-bedroom flat that could be under £100,000. That seems an inappropriate way to calculate it. I would have thought of, and I don't know if there is a government guideline as to how you have to have an average, but if there isn't, it would seem much more sensible that you assume there is one resident per bedroom. So if you have a 1-bedroom flat, you pay for 1. If you have a 5-bedroom house, you pay for 5. And that seems a much more equitable way and to reflect the pressures that it's likely to put onto the health system. And it seems particularly inappropriate that with the difficulty for people getting onto the housing ladder, that you unfairly put weight on the those the younger ones who are trying to get in. And actually, there is a section in this that says about protected characteristics. Age is a protected characteristic, and I think this is unfair on age.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Crowe. That's an interesting point made on that. I don't know whether there's anyone to answer that from a technical perspective. It might be Councillor Fuller, slightly in the front row there. That might be the way it lands. But you know, don't feel you have to provide information. You know, I appreciate you being put on the spot on the technical question. Don't feel you have to provide an answer if you're unsure. But please go ahead.
I'll have a go. I think the issue is it's about the methodology being used in order to assess how we look at those housing contributions. Again, I am not an expert on the methodology being used, and could I request that response goes back to James Brewer, because this is his day-to-day things. From my point of view, it's a great policy to have because it means that we can get something a little bit more out of developers to support our health services. You know, I think one of the things that I've heard quite a lot, probably more from our communities than from planning committee, but residents are always saying, well, you know, our infrastructure isn't good enough to be able to cope with more homes, and this is a way of addressing that. So we've been out to consultation, we've had feedback, and I don't think anybody's objected to that information. But going back to your initial question, Chris, I can't answer that because I don't understand enough about the methodology being used to ensure that the appropriate funds are being justified. Thank you. Apologies for that.
I mean, it feels like, Councillor Crowe, that should form maybe this committee's comment on the document.
I would like
got another question. Please do.
The other thing is that there's a limit to how much you can put pressure on developers in terms of 106 agreements. And there is a consequence that if you take money for this, you do take money away from the potential for providing for parks or improved roads or other amenities. So there is a limit to what you can do, because if you put too much of a burden on it, it affects financial sustainability of the development. That's grounds for appeal. And if you go to appeal, you lose all of the 106 agreements totally.
I suppose that's an operational consideration on the decisions that flow from this. Are there any other? Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. It's made clear in the paper, but just if I may draw attention to it, that the money will only be, as it were, towards the infrastructure, so the physical building. And the real problem, I think, in many cases, is actually not lack of physical premises, but lack of sufficient doctors and nurses on the island, staff. So yeah, I'm not sure, I don't want to pour cold water on it, because in essence it's a good idea, but I'm not sure really how effective it's going to be. What will happen, for example, to say, for example, a building is extended and then we can't get any staff. What will happen to the extended building?
I think you're absolutely right. This is a plan for the infrastructure rather than to extend buildings to have more GPs. I think we'd all like to have more GPs. I think more GPs, more nurses, more dentists for the island is something that is really important. What we have is, again, a lot of this is optional. You know, you can't ask for a contribution from a developer if you don't have a policy in place. This is a starting point to allow that to happen. So again, there will need to be discussion with the circumstances that are being addressed, and we take things from there. But it is a starting point, and it's a policy that is created. Again, it might be worthwhile, I know that we have other counties that are doing exactly the same. Hampshire, for example, Somerset, Devon have this policy in place, and it would be quite interesting to find out how they can improve things. You've got to start somewhere, and this is an opportunity to do that.
One more question, if I may. Thank you. The other thing is this, and a question that I have is this, and it may be that you'll want to refer this, but that is, my understanding is that the provision or absence of the provision of healthcare is relevant now, and therefore a material planning consideration when planning committee, or for that matter, an officer takes a decision. And I see you nodding, because up until now, often the advice given to planning committee is that the absence of medical facilities is not a material planning consideration and does not justify refusal. What has changed? Why is it now a material consideration when a week ago it wasn't?
Thank you. I think the basis is on having this new policy in place to be able to give us more scope to be able to negotiate this with developers. So again, I'm looking at the risk management section of the report on page 41, which says the main risk of not adopting the health contributions SPD is that the local planning authority will not be able to use the guidance within this document as a material consideration when determining planning applications. That is the point that we're at the moment. So I think it's important to realise that, and to be able to know that this actually allows us the opportunity to be able to get more out of our developer contributions.
Thank you, Paul. I may well put in a written question to James, just to clarify, because it does seem to me that it's now a material planning consideration that has a significant effect on the way in which planning committee approaches applications. And it's important that that's clarified, that it's both a reason for granting and a reason against granting if there are no such facilities, which is a major change. Thank you.
Councillor Quirk.
I don't think I saw it in the papers, but I'd like Mr. Ward to just give me the reassurance that this isn't a slush fund that goes to surgeries. This is something that will be held by the council and then paid out when they're actually building the stuff against proof that the building is actually going up.
I have to confess I was concentrating on something else at the time of the discussion, so if you could repeat the question, Councillor Quirk.
But I'll do it again. We're talking about money going to practices to expand because of the pressure of a new housing estate.
Section 106 money.
Yes, that's Section 106 money. That this money doesn't just go to the practice that they hide it somewhere and they've got their little slush fund, but it actually is held by the council and then distributed against evidence of the building work actually being done.
Yeah, there's always conditions attached to Section 106 funds, and the conditions have to be met for the development to be able to take place.
Councillor Redjohn.
Thank you, Chair. I just want some clarification. I was reading the consultation comments, and the Newport and Carisbrooke Community Council made a good point. They said a large number of healthcare facilities on the island are currently based in older buildings, which would not be possible to extend, and this financial contribution could force these facilities to move and buy bigger premises to function elsewhere. So there has been GP surgeries closing down or relocating out of villages. If those villages were to then have housing developments, could the money generated provide something new in that area, or would it go to an existing surgery elsewhere?
My hope is that it can go to providing something new, but again, it's a matter really for talking to the doctors' surgeries in the local area to find out what the need is. You know, certainly I know that at Wootton, a lot of the patients that are looked after by the Wootton surgery are actually based in Newport, and I would imagine that there would need to be discussions on trying to be able to facilitate something in place for the people that currently benefit from that who live in Wootton. So again, it's about negotiation rather than that. But you can only negotiate if you have a tool to be able to do that with. And with this policy, we hope that we can achieve that. Thank you, Sarah.
Can I take it that the committee agrees with adopting this or supports the adoption of this SPD? Yeah, I think it'd be useful to capture your comments that you made, Councillor Quirk, or questions around addresses and people and the difference between the two in terms of contributions. Are we happy with that as a committee? Yeah, great, thank you. And on to another one, draft sustainable drainage. So item number 9, draft sustainable drainage systems supplementary planning document. Again, that's in the papers. Do I have any comments or questions on that one? Councillor Churchman.
Well, it's a bit of a statement, really. After this last year and the absolutely appalling flooding that we've experienced, various circumstances have caused it. But I would have thought this is almost the most important document in front of us today for strategic reasons. Because if we don't stop this flooding, it's costing the council money, we're losing homes, it's disrupting businesses, we're losing roads. So, as I said, I find this document extremely good, I might add, very comprehensive. I think I understood most of what I read, but just how do we really get it going so that it makes a difference to the way the island is at the moment for the future? Because from what I can make out from different people, we're going to get weather like this now fairly continually. It isn't a one-off year. We've had a lot of rain. This is going to continue, which is why, to me, this is the major thing here today. I'd like to know what planning their responses to it, how I presume they take it seriously. But Paul, Councillor Fuller, perhaps you could make a comment on how seriously our planning department take this. Are we beginning to implement it? Obviously, there are costs involved. I voted recently against a planning application because I was very concerned about the water, etc., the one down Cowes Gurnard. I'm terribly concerned about Bembridge. And one other very small point about this is, being married to a charter surveyor, I was always told the more concrete you lay, the more you make water go into smaller runoffs. Do we have in planning a policy to only allow permeable parking to be installed? Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Vanessa. I think a lot of the planning policies that we've been using locally has been from 2015. Since then, there has been a lot of legislation that's been imposed, and I know now that you know, certainly with respect to parking that you were talking about, if you want to create a parking bay more than 5 square meters, you have to apply for planning permission for that. So that is one of the new things that have come up. But certainly since 2015, the world has moved on. The planning strategy that was passed last week has got a lot of policies in it for flooding. Precisely for that reason, we're seeing a lot of issues being created by the surface water drainage at the moment. certainly over this year, things definitely need improving. I was at a meeting a couple of weeks ago with Councillor Lever in Gunville. And one of the things that the residents that attended that meeting there sort of like criticised the planners for was, well, why did you allow these buildings to go ahead? Well, the reason that those buildings went ahead was because we didn't have robust enough policies in place to be able to make sure that the right kind of infrastructure was put in place for those homes. This policy is for me very, very important as well, because again, I agree with you. I think it's probably the most important thing that we have on the agenda before us tonight, because it is really important that we actually are seen as a council to be able to tackle some of the issues that we're suffering from, particularly from surface water drainage. This is a good place to start. I'm sure that in the coming years, we're going to hear more from government about supporting more work taking place, but this is really from my point of view, this is a starting point on us moving forward within the new plan. The policies are already there within the Iron Planning Strategy, but this actually re-emphasises it. And I think when you look at the comments that we've had back from members of the public, they've been quite extensive, and a lot of people are in support of this, which I was really, really heartened to hear. And certainly with all that's happened in the last 6 months, it's a very, very timely document. Thank you.
Councillor Church.
Sorry, one thing that really worries me is the RSPB, the Environment Agency. They seem to have more power on this island than the council does. Is there anything we do about that? Because I mean, we go back to Simeon Wreck when it really got flooded. We know who's, yeah. But the point is that that destroyed families' lives. So what I'm also really concerned about is the power of some of these quangos. Do they override what we as a council put forward? Thank you.
It's a good question. Certainly, I know the issues that you're referring to with the RSPB and the use of their sluice gates down at St Helens. And again, there are concerns about how those are operated on, and the impact that will have on residential dwellings. So again, it is I share your concern on this. Certainly with the Environment Agency, from my perspective, the Environment Agency have been quite good in certainly some of the discussions that they've had with local residents about sort of like flooding. So they have done some good things. I know there's concern, particularly down in Ryde, about the gates that were created. I don't know enough about what section 19 report states on that, but we're awaiting those section 19 reports on the flooding across the island. So it would be useful to look at those, digest those, and be able to feed back. And I think that's something maybe the Scrutiny Committee may want to look at in future, because I think those reports are really, really, really important.
Yeah, we now have flooding as a sort of 6-monthly agenda item. I think the next one is July. So if the section 19 reports are ready for that time, we can use that.
Yes, Chairman, I think that they're going to be available in sort of like weeks. So we should be able to get those for you in July, but I'm hoping so. I really would like the officers to be able to digest those as well. Again, as we know, section 19 reports don't come with any funding. But again, it allows the local communities to get together to talk to landowners and those adjacent about how they can make things better for the future, and not learn from some of the mistakes that may or may not have happened.
Thank you. So we've got a question from Councillor Quirk and then Councillor Downer.
For new builds and going forward, absolutely brilliant. We've got an issue with what's already there, because there's a lot more that's already there than there's going to be of new builds for a very long while to come. But the same will apply. Once you've got things in place, you need enforcement to keep it working properly. In Shanklin, we have 2 block culverts causing significant flooding. I mean, one house has been flooded up to 6 feet deep 8 times in the last year. This is, and it's due to lack of applied enforcement. And we need to actually have the enforcement to back up things like if someone doesn't build a cover very well, it goes under a house and it's expensive to fix, you've still got to fix it. If you've got to have retaining walls on streams that are directed, you've got to maintain them. And so you need an enforcement side. Now, enforcement isn't a statutory duty, but, big but, investigating any breaches of planning applications is a statutory duty. So effectively, it is a statutory duty to have enforcement. And we need to have enforcement to back up. And where things go wrong, whether it's old buildings or new buildings, to ensure that that does work. And there's probably more we can do with what's there now than about what we can do in the future. Maintaining rural ditches makes a big difference. Ploughing the right way across fields makes a big difference. There are lots of things that can be done that National Farmers Union been doing a lot of really good work, actually, and trying to educate farmers to follow some of these. But there's a lot that can be done to help flooding that is beyond what we've, this is a supplementary planning policy for just the new builds, but we maybe should have something looking at the broader picture of actually flooding, because there's a lot more that can be done. And a lot of that is education and enforcement.
Again, this committee will have an opportunity to talk more about flooding. I mean, those are very important reminders, Councillor Clark. I don't want to go too far off this particular agenda item. So if I bring in Councillor Downer.
Oh, just a quick one, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, years ago, they used to have a river board, and they used to keep the water courses clear, albeit we didn't have the rain that we had, like we're having now. But I think, that it's important to keep water courses clear, so because then they got the capacity, ain't they? And I do entirely agree with what Councillor Quirk has been speaking about with the agricultural aspect of it, because monocrops as well, you harvest them and then the land lies fallow. But the trouble is you can get soil erosion there. And years ago, they took all the hedges out. Well, that wasn't a bit of good, because, there's nothing to, protect the soil and also, yeah. So that might be a bit off the target, but there you go. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Downer. Councillor Spink.
Thank you, Chair. Just an observation and possibly a question, Councillor Fuller. That is, Southern Water will obviously play an important part in this. Southern Water have said on various occasions that they can cope with the sewage, but they can't deal with the rainwater and surface water going into the combined sewage drain. So it will be very important, if I may say so, to attenuation tanks, for example, I think in my view are one of the least attractive forms of SUDS, because they just slow it down. It still ends up, and there will come a point, one would imagine, when they won't be able to slow it down sufficiently. I am concerned that perhaps Southern Water aren't being consulted enough in this, and I think Southern Water feel as it's the case. Now, for example, if I could refer you to page 105, which is statutory consultees, there's a comment there by Southern Water. Early consultation with Southern Water and local planning authority will be required before developing the site layout or master plan. To ensure a viable drainage strategy, Southern Water must be contacted before submitting a planning application. This will allow agreement of any connections and discharge rates into the public sewer network, as well as adoptable SUDS design and standards. And if I may say so, the answer of how to deal with that seems to be almost bordering on rude, quite frankly, complete a wastewater pre-planning inquiry application form and email it to developer services at Southern Water. Not very attractive, and doesn't really give confidence to anyone, let alone Southern Water, that they will be properly consulted. So I do think we need to take Southern Water more seriously and listen to them when they say, because what we need to be doing is having more grey water recycling suds, not just great big ponds, which will store up problems in the next few years. Thank you.
I'll take Councillor Lever as well, and then you might want to respond to both.
Yeah, it was just on that point, Chair. So the how to console section, is that purely our estimation on how to do that, or is Southern Water actually input into that? So so that's Southern Water's answer on how to console, essentially.
Councillor Fuller.
We're quite lucky because the author of this paper is James Brewer, and James, as we all know, is the council's flood officer or the heads up the flood team as well. So again, there's a lot of communication that is going on between Southern Water and particularly James on some of the flood issues. Just going to go through flooding enforcement. Couldn't agree with you more. Flooding enforcement is a huge issue. I approached Ollie, the planning team, and also Southern Water to find out whether Southern Water might want to put some of the money that they're getting for to decrease surface water drainage into planning enforcement. I thought it was a really good idea to get Southern Water and the Isle of Wight Council working together to reduce our stormwater flows. There is a memorandum of understanding that we're working on at the moment to ensure that happens. But I think what we want to try to do with Southern Water is to go out and educate people as well, because people don't realise that, you know, it's not just concreting over your driveway, but also things like putting in astroturf into your front garden, and how quickly that can speed up the flow of water going into our combined sewers. So again, those discussions, I've been very, very enthusiastic about trying to move forward, because I think it is really, really important. Southern Water actually gets it, because they're the people that are blamed for when the water goes out into our outlets, into our sea, and those of course has the dreadful S word sort of like attached to it in sewage. So again, it's something that we are working very, very closely with Southern Water on, and as a utility service, they've worked very closely with the planners in the last year. So I'm hoping that we can move things forward. And again, maybe this is something that your committee chairman might want to look at further at its meeting in July. And you know, the relationship we have with Keith from Southern Water is fantastic, and the Pathfinder project and some of the other things that are going on in the background is really, really positive. So thank you for that. The riparian rights and the agricultural aspect of this as well. And this was the thinking behind where I was going with getting sort of like planning enforcement looking primarily at water, because again, it's going to those farmers, going to those landowners, and actually giving them advice and support on how they can make sure that their land is used in a much more sustainable way. We don't want to lose soil to our road on our roads. We want to use our soil for what it's there for, and that is supporting our landowners and our farmers, which is so important. So yes, I'm having those discussions, and I hope they can continue. So thank you very much. Thank you.
Before we move on, Councillor Jarman was there.
Yeah, one of the issues I've raised a few times is reinstatement of the ditches along the roads which have been lost over time. Thank you. And I wonder if we could clarify exactly what provision there is for that and what funding is available for reinstatement of those ditches.
I don't want to go too off topic, but is there a brief response to that, Councillor Fuller?
Well, my responsibility doesn't go as far as highways, unfortunately, but I know locally from my area, some of the local farmers and the local farmers that I've spoken to are very, very pleased to put in ditches to be able to reduce the stormwater. Again, the ditches that were put in place 50 years ago, a lot of them have overgrown. I saw one in freshwater down at Longhalves a couple of weeks ago, and how those ditches have been allowed to grow, and they don't really do the job that they're supposed to do. And I think having sort of like the maintenance is something that is quite important as well. At the moment, I don't think government's quite got it, but I would imagine when they do, they'll probably see that it would be much more cost effective to educate and support landowners to be able to make sure that their land takes away water or slows the flow of water than building hard infrastructure like was mentioned about attenuation tanks. There are better ways of getting water off of our surfaces than just necessarily building attenuation tanks. I think they're the right thing in the right places, but necessarily it's not the one answer that suits all. But thank you for that.
So, Councillor Redrup.
Sorry, I'll just keep it very quick. I just want to say I think this is really fantastic, and I think the team's done a really, really good job on it. And I just want to echo what other people have said about education. I think that's really, really important, because something that's clear from the document is that there's no magic wand for one fix all. It's lots of small little things that everyone takes a part in, and that is perhaps a message that isn't quite well understood. And I would like to encourage there to be perhaps something available online that people can access just to educate themselves more on it. Thank you.
So can I, Councillor John, very quickly?
Very quickly, Chair. So it is a highways question. I agree, Paul. So thank you for. I know the redirection is there, but it would help if we could have some clear guidance for communities. If a community wants to reopen and clear a ditch along the side of a highway, which has now been filled in and tarmacked over, are they permitted to do so? And if so, what is the process for doing it? Because I've got one I'd do that within a few weeks. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that, Chris. I think the other thing moving on to that is about flood plans as well, getting the local flood plans in place for town and parish councils. And maybe there's something that, with my flood hat on and without thinking about highways, maybe that is something we can work with our town and parish councils to make sure could be made more robust. I know that IWALC have a meeting with, they're looking at flooding this month at their topic meeting. So again, it's something that the town and parish councils are also being quite proactive about. And again, if there are members who have parish councils that would like to attend the IWALC meeting, I'm sure they would be much more than welcome. So yes, I'm looking forward to that later this month. Thank you.
And a last comment or question from Councillor Church.
And could we please include the National Trust in this? They own an awful lot of land on this island. And from what I can see, they never clear ditches. Specifically behind me, Luckham Farm, the water just collects. And when it collects, it causes problems, it causes slippage. The ditches on that Luckham Farm have never, ever been cleared. And it's appalling, appalling.
Thank you. Can I take it the committee then supports the adoption of this supplementary planning document? You can see nods and hands all round. Thank you very much. Item number 10, future governance report. So of course, when we put this on the agenda, we didn't know what the outcome of full council last week would be. But as we now know, full council voted to approve a change from a cabinet to a committee system, and for that to take effect in May 2025, so a year from now. This agenda item, I think, would have been particularly important had full council wanted to implement a committee system this month. Clearly, the timeline is now far longer, but I think it's important that there isn't a sudden relaxation of activity, and that we park this and only address our minds to it in March next year and realise that we've only got a couple of months left. So I suppose it'd be if there's anyone able to give us an update either in the room or online. Claire Shand is there, I think, as to just rough timelines, outlines of the work that needs to be done and when we expect it. And for me, I would hope, given a year, we will have an excellent draft constitution at the end of it to replace our current one. Claire Shand, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, very much indeed. And I think basically at the moment it's fair to say that we are work in progress, but there are, as you rightly say, a number of stages that we will have to proceed to from here. The first one really is, this has been treated as a project, and so it will be incumbent upon us to make sure that we close that project down accordingly and make sure that everything is cleared off in terms of the actions contained within it, and obviously to take any lessons learned from the process to enable us to take account of what's important to consider as part of the next phase. So as soon as we've done that, and I guess that won't take a great deal of time, we are already starting to consider what the next project looks like in terms of that phase 2. As you'll appreciate, most of the work that was focused on the anticipated early implementation date to make sure that we had been able to prepare as much as we possibly could for that implementation. But none of that work is lost, in the sense that it will help to inform that next phase. As you rightly say, there's obviously the Constitution will be a key piece of work that will need to be looked at, both in terms of giving us the opportunity to fully consider the elements of the committee system and what's required of the Constitution, as well as to deal with the snagging list that we're all aware of, in terms of trying to address some of the perhaps anomalies and things that aren't as clear as they could be in the Constitution to allow us to operate effectively. And clearly the Audit and Governance Committee has that within their remit in terms of the oversight of governance. So we will be establishing a programme of activity that will enable us to do that. We did have an indication from the Independent Remuneration Panel that they had prepared a draft members allowance scheme, but again they'll be working alongside us over the next 12 months so that they can probably take into account all the various considerations in proposing a new member allowance scheme. And of course we'll be trying to do as much preparation as we can in terms of understanding how the committee system itself is going to operate, and clearly there'll be a schedule of training to go with that. So I'm hopeful in the next few weeks for us to have a new implementation plan, some of which, as I say, has already been prepared, but we will need to look at how we take this project forward now. So we should by the end of May be in a better place to have that project plan ready for implementation. And clearly scrutiny going forward will have an important part to play in terms of the oversight of the work to be done. And I guess we'll also be wanting to make suggestions as to how they might want to be involved, or indeed contribute or increase their ability to participate in this piece of work. So any suggestions from the committee would be most welcome. And I guess the other point that we will need to be considering is reviewing, as there was quite a bit of discussion about in terms of the risks that were contained within the report itself. Clearly we are in a situation where we effectively have no change to the current governance arrangements. And so clearly we'll be needing to look at how we can support members across the chamber in terms of that whole kind of governance piece and decision-making processes over the next 12 months. So I think that's probably all that I need to say at this point in time, unless, of course, anybody's got any questions that I can answer.
Thank you. Yeah. Do you envisage, well, I've sort of probably given an opinion for, I wouldn't imagine a role now for the working group that did its job effectively. It brought the issue to a final vote.
That's right.
Would that be fair?
That's right. Yes. Yes, that is certainly our working assumption, is that the future governance working group was there to guide us towards a decision for the council, and we provided support to reach that decision. So full council has now made the decision to move to a committee system. That's not to say that members won't be involved in the next part of the process. It's just that that we will see a closure of the future governance working group in terms of it's fulfilled its remit that was given to it by full council last March.
And in terms of this committee, it would be good to see the timetable you talk about in due course when it's ready.
Yeah. Happy to make that available.
Thank you. But also, I think specifically over the Constitution, because there was some conversation probably at least 2 years ago amongst councillors that nothing to do with changing to a new system, that the current Constitution needed work. Clearly, it's going to be replaced effectively because of a new governance system. I think it would be good to see councillor involvement in that, and this committee might be a good way to achieve it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Scrutiny's got an important part to play in that, and clearly what the next 12 months does give us is that additional time to involve members more widely in terms of the construction of the new constitution. Clearly there is a remit through the Audit and Governance Committee in terms of its oversight and production. But I would anticipate that there would be a desire from members to have a much wider, viewing and oversight of the Constitution as it develops over the next 12 months.
Thank you. And I'm looking at hands up in the room. I think Councillor Jarman, you did have your hand up.
Yes, Chair. So on this, if members recall, the amendments were taken contrary to the order which they were submitted. And there was a clarification received from Justin Thorne that day regarding how one amendment might impact another. And of course, an amendment cannot change something which has been changed in a previous amendment. So the clarification was that if an amendment for section F was passed, another amendment following it could not be put. So the amendment which stands is the one which was agreed, which is the first one agreed, namely that a revised replacement constitution relating to the operation of the committee system, including the interim members allowance scheme just discussed, be brought to the annual council meeting on the 15th of May 2024 for consideration, approval and adoption. And that was the motion that was passed.
You slightly lost me, Councillor Jarman. Are you saying that the constitution for a committee system should be presented in a week's time, notwithstanding the committee system won't come in for a year? Or are you suggesting something more groundbreaking? Well, that's fairly groundbreaking in and of itself. Can you explain yourself in terms that I understand, unless, Claire, you understand?
Yes, the clarification from Justin Thorne was that an amendment cannot revoke a previous amendment. So the question was, if an amendment is taken and it fixes a date, can a subsequent amendment change that date? And the answer is no. So the amendment that was passed first was that the constitution would be brought to full council on the 15th of May 2024. A subsequent amendment cannot overturn that date. It can delay the process for implementation, but it cannot change something that's been agreed in a previous amendment, i.e. section F. So it still stands that the constitution is to be brought forward on the 15th of May 2024, although the implementation was agreed to be delayed until 2025. Thank you.
Okay, that sounds rather a big one to drop in the middle of the meeting, but I don't know, Claire Shan, do you have any comment to make on that?
I'm not sure I'm technically qualified to answer that question. That's a legal interpretation that I guess we would need to have some advice from Chris and the legal team. In theory, if I was to make an observation, I can understand the technicality of it, but adopting a constitution that doesn't take effect until a further 12 months doesn't quite seem to be appropriate in the circumstances, given that there's the implementation doesn't actually commence until 2025. But that's just a personal opinion.
I noticed Chris Potter's still on screen, so I might bring him in. I mean, my comment would be, Councillor Jarman, I hope you're not right, because I think it would be a shame to have to rush a constitution in within a week when it's not going to take effect for a year. Mr. Potter.
Thank you, Chairman. As has been rightly said, the council made a decision to change to the committee system, but the actual change implementation date won't be until May next year at the annual council meeting. In terms of the point raised by Councillor Jarman about amendments, obviously amendments can be made to particular motions, and the current constitution sets out what constitutes a valid amendment and what would not constitute a valid amendment, and clearly a lot will depend upon the context. But drill down to the essentials, we are going to remain operating a leader cabinet executive system until the new system takes over in May next year at the annual council meeting, and therefore adopting and approving a constitution which is not relevant to the operation of the leader and cabinet executive system, it cannot possibly make any sense. So there is time, as has been outlined, for member involvement and for further discussions on the type of constitution in terms of its detail and so forth, which can be worked through carefully, but with appropriate speed to make sure we are all ready for approval and adoption of the relevant constitution, which will be relevant to operating a committee system, which is at the annual council meeting of May next year. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Are there any further comments on item 10, future governance report? Councillor Cook.
Clearly, I wouldn't be earning my keep if I didn't mention iWalk in this. I just want to reiterate what I've mentioned before, that don't forget iWalk representation when it comes to new governance. I would hope that we would be included in any such representation. I believe we'll be discussing it on our next executive meeting. And as I said before, I mean, obviously this committee would be going, but it would be good if we had something of equivalent value, so we can still have meaningful input into the your processes. I did raise this with when we had the meetings to town and council before the decision was made, and the argument was given that, well, most Isle of Wight councillors are town and parish councillors anyway, and that's good enough. But I mean, I would strongly argue against that. Not all Isle of Wight councillors are indeed town and parish councillors. Also, members here have got a lot on their plate, and how can I put this politely? Might not be as involved in their local councils as they might be. So I still would argue very strongly for the role of iWalk, the representation, and I hope we'll be included in that dialogue. Thank you.
Yeah, I agree, Councillor Cook, and I can see Claire Shan nodding her head, so thank you for that. Looks like we've got to the end of that agenda item. Thank you. Item number 11, Community Safety Partnership Annual Report. Again, a report you've got in your papers, page 191. Is there anything Councillor Lucioni wanted to say by way of introduction or summary on the Community Safety Partnership report? Or should we dive straight in?
Just dive straight in. So our next CSP meeting is the 23rd of May. So we'll welcome your feedback and any extra that we can add to it. Thank you.
Fine. Any hands up from the committee? Councillor Quirk.
I think it's very disappointing that our crime rates going up to match Hampshire and towards the national average. I think that's a shame. It seems to be driven by domestic violence, which is something that is quite worrying. And I know there are sort of schemes to try and address that. It's also driven by a very substantial increase, although from a low base, in terms of drug arrests, and also in terms of carrying weapons. And drug crime and weapons tend to go very much hand in hand. And so I wonder if there is any clear association between those two.
Thank you, Councillor Quirk. So yeah, as I said in the report, domestic abuse does continue to make up a significant proportion of crime locally. There is an Isle of Wight Domestic Abuse Board that has been established, and that takes the lead on tackling that particular area on the island. So the priority for within the strategic needs assessment for the Community Safety Partnership is that the Domestic Abuse Board will take the lead on that, and the Community Safety Partnership will continue to support the board, and it has the duty to commission what we call DHRs, domestic homicide reviews, when that criteria is met and put forward by Hampshire Constabulary. So that's how we deal with that. In terms of the links between drugs and knife crime, yes, there are obviously links between that and antisocial behaviour. So we have a system called Prevent, where there are it's like for educational establishments or other establishments that deal with both young people and adults, particularly those who have vulnerabilities. There is an assessment that can be made, and if necessary, that person can be referred, and the Prevent Board run by the council will then review those assessments and make a decision about where additional support can be offered to that person to try to bring them back into the community, to give them that support that they need in order hopefully for them to be able to evaluate their behaviours and then make that choice to obviously to become involved in that type of antisocial behaviour. If that doesn't work, case can be moved to a different channel of action, which is led by the police.
And just to let you know, domestic abuse is actually looked after by public health. That's why Simon's come on the screen.
I've just seen Simon appear on the big screen. Welcome, Simon. Brian, is there anything you wanted to add?
And we've got an item shortly on the perpetrated part of domestic abuse, but I just wanted to share that as the chair of the Domestic Abuse Board, we take it really seriously and do an awful lot of work, both with our providers and our partners, to reduce domestic abuse and the impact, and also trying to break that cycle of people who are in and out of relationships which are abusive. Coincidentally, I also chair the drug partnership, and we're doing an awful lot of work to increase the number of people through drugs and alcohol. It's worth saying in this forum, we have been given, alongside every other council in England, increased funding for drugs and alcohol. And the paper came to the Health and Wellbeing Board 10 days ago, but that funding is not confirmed after April 2025. But Laura Johnson, who's the domestic abuse principal and leads this area, and I can talk through anything as part of this or the next item.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we may struggle to try and sort of divide the two agenda items and not sort of seep onto item 12, which is very important in its own right. Councillor Redrup.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to point out that the top increase is actually sexual offences, not domestic abuse. So while there is overlap between those, they are different. So my first question is, who is responsible for that? I guess it doesn't sit with the Domestic Abuse Partnership Board. And then my second question is, there doesn't really seem to be a breakdown of statistics around specifically violence against women and girls. I was wondering if that's something that should be included in there, or it would be interesting to see anyway. Thank you.
Just to let you know, there's a separate board with the Police and Crime Commission that deals with violence against women and girls. I sit on that, but I can speak to you privately about that if you want to know more details.
Yeah, and can I just remind the committee that what we're being asked in this agenda item is to confirm that we're satisfied that the partnership is fulfilling its statutory duty. That is the question we're being asked. Councillor Redrup.
Sorry, then, just to clarify, your answer to Councillor Quirk's question was that the domestic abuse goes to that board. So my specific question was, as the biggest change on the percentage change on the list here is sexual offences, who does that sit with?
That sits with the police as the lead agency for that. Sorry, Laurie, before you got more details.
Basically, exactly what Simon said is, so that would actually sit with Hampshire Constabulary. So, but they do sit on the Community Safety Partnership Board. So therefore, any fee, if you would like to, if what you're asking is you would like to see, as with the other charts within the report, you would like to see a breakdown of the individual groupings of violence against women and girls as opposed to just domestic violence, then that's fine. We can take that as an action point and let you know whether it's possible to have that data separately as a breakdown. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, that would be great, because
okay.
And under the sexual offences headline, so those two things being separate.
That's fine. I can take that as an action and find out exactly what we can publish and put that into the report wherever possible. Okay.
Thank you. I did see Laura Johnson, you had your hand up and it's gone down again. Did you want to say anything?
I was just going to add that, as well as it being a police responsibility, the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner actually commission services in relation to sexual offences, and specifically ISVAs, which are independent sexual violence advocates. And on the Isle of Wight, that's delivered by the Hampton Trust.
Thank you. Councillor Lever, did you have your hand up?
I was teetering. I'm happy to endorse.
Don't feel pressured to if it was a change.
It was just a question out of curiosity. So in the breakdown of violence against the person, two of those breakdowns are violence without injury and violence with injury. Do we know what's the reason they're split out? And there's a reason for why I'm asking that. I was just curious. Do we know why?
I would imagine, but I would have to confirm, it's to take into account the fact that obviously there is certain types of domestic abuse and violence, and some of them have physical, present physically, and some of them potentially, but there may not be no physical evidence of it, but it's more coercion, emotional abuse, things like that. But I will caveat that with, I do have to check, but that would be my opinion.
That's fine.
Yeah.
I think that's why I was asking, because obviously that split focuses in on whether there was a physical result of injury, but when we see data like this, there tends not to be as much focus on what the mental impacts were on victims or people that have experienced this. So just something to put out there. Yeah.
I think it's just how the police record them, but I'll clarify that for you.
Do we have any further comments or contributions? If not, I'm going to ask the question 'cause I think we're required to. Is this committee able to confirm it's satisfied that the partnership is fulfilling its statutory duty? I can see some nods. I can see nods. Yeah, thank you. And on to the final item, the Perpetrator Programme, to receive a report on the lines of inquiry previously agreed by this committee, pages 251 to 268. The report looks like more of a sort of slideshow. I don't know, is there someone who's reporting on this? Yeah, Simon Bryan.
Chair, so thank you very much. So you've got myself as chair of the Domestic Abuse Partnership Board and Director of Public Health, with Laura Johnson, who is our lead in the council, and Lisa Allam, who is the head of commissioning in the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner. What we have done is put together a slide set report on the information as suggested. Some of the questions are more general, so we can talk through that and with some specific data. What I'd like to say is we've had a domestic abuse partnership board as set out with the Domestic Abuse Act for a year now, all working very well together, as you've heard, through community safety partnerships with police, with the Office of Police Crime Commissioner, and with health partners, fire, etc. And this about perpetrators of abuse really shows the work we are doing for those who are displaying behaviours that are abusive. We're trying to really move the system forward and change the language. So Laura and Lisa can either talk through the presentation or take questions, whatever is the most convenient for the panel.
Yeah, I think I'm happy to not necessarily receive a great detailed report, but any further summary from Lisa or Laura, and then maybe we'll move to committee questions and deal with it that way.
That's brilliant. Laura, over to you.
Thank you. Well, I hope you've all had an opportunity to look at the presentation, and thank you for your interest in this area. The key points that we had planned to convey to you was really regarding the national policy context. And you'll see one of the first quotes on the presentation is regarding domestic abuse and sexual violence being considered as seriously as knife crime and homicide. And that came from a government report in 21. And that's really related to the impact of domestic abuse, which is not widely understood, around the mental, emotional and physical consequences. And of course, in the very worst cases, the homicide and suicides related to domestic abuse. So the national kind of policy context includes the two documents that we've listed there. The Tackling Domestic Abuse Plan and Tackling Violence Against Women and Girls Strategy. And that's what our approach has been based on. I'm just having a look to give you the key points and not the more detailed summary. It would be good to draw your attention to the coordinated community response, which is a framework that the Domestic Abuse Partnership have adopted. The CCR involves various agencies and organisations working together to address domestic abuse. The goal is to ensure victim safety, to hold offenders to account and to provide a more effective and uniform response to domestic abuse cases. So it's a whole systems approach, and it's designed to respond to the whole person. It recognises people cannot be categorised into one experience or to one box or one risk or one need. So the CCR has 12, is a framework of 12 components, and Perpetrator Programmes fits specifically under specialist services. If you refer to the presentation, you will be able to see the other 11 on there, which are more indirectly related. Simon has already introduced the Isle of Wight Domestic Abuse Partnership, which coordinates the response to domestic abuse on the Isle of Wight. Other key important things are that we have recently developed our strategy, and our key priorities are prevention and reduction of harm, increased access to specialist support, collaboration and working together, which of course all feeds again into this Perpetrator Programme agenda. Lisa, did you want to talk briefly to Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary response?
Yeah, sure, Laura. And I think there was a specific question around the training that police officers receive in relation to domestic abuse and how they respond. So the slide in the deck that you were sent, which is slide 5, sets out what training Isle of Hampshire and Isle of Wight Constabulary receive. But it was just to add in to that information included that there's also independent scrutiny panels for out of court interventions for domestic abuse, and that's to ensure that the police are using out of court resolutions appropriately and that the right cases are being utilised for that. So it's only intended for low and in some examples medium risk offences, and that panel consists of the Crown Prosecution Service, Specialist Victim Services, magistrates, and other partners. So just to ensure that there's some external scrutiny going on regarding the police's decision making in relation to that. They also have specific domestic abuse scrutiny panels within the force, where they invite the force leads for domestic abuse, but also domestic abuse specialists, so that they can review domestic abuse incidents and ensure that the police response was appropriate and proportionate to the severity of what happened. There's also been a huge amount of work undertaken within the constabulary regarding police perpetrated domestic abuse, and there's now a dedicated unit set up within the force to be able to respond to that, and that includes that whenever there is a report of police perpetrated domestic abuse, that a senior oversight officer, which is a minimum of a chief inspector level, is allocated to be the victim's link in and to ensure that the investigation is being conducted as it should be. So that was the overview regarding the training, and if there are any other specific questions in relation to that, I can feed that back to the force leads for you. I was due to cover slide 6 as well, so I'll just go on, Laura, just to pull out the key bits of that. The diagram that's shown on that shows kind of the range of options that are available for people living on the Isle of Wight. CARA is the out of court intervention that I mentioned. It stands for Cautioning and Relationship Abuse. It's commissioned by the APCC. But really key on that point is that it's a domestic abuse awareness raising intervention. It is not designed to be a behaviour change intervention, and that is why it is only suitable for people who have never offended before and are committing low risk offences. And it is about supporting perpetrators to make better behaviour choices within their relationships. Hampshire Police were the first force to pilot out of court resolutions for domestic abuse offences, and since the initial pilot evaluation, which was a randomised control trial, there have been several further evaluations demonstrating the effectiveness of that intervention. It's got proven benefits in terms of reduction of reoffending, victims reporting positive changes, and offenders themselves reporting a change in their attitude towards their partners and their children.
Shall we pause there, Lisa, for questions? I think that
Sure.
shows the kind of range of interventions we've got available to the island across a range of partners, which makes it a really complex picture. So thank you, Chair. We'll very happy to take questions between us.
Thank you, all of you. Is there, there's a hand up here, Councillor Churchman.
Yes, I'm delighted to see such a good report. On page 251, however, reversing the trend of the perpetrator of domestic abuse remaining in the home while the victim must leave. I mean, as most victims are women, not always, it does occasionally go the other way, but I cannot believe that women are being forced out of their homes, especially where there are children involved. And it really concerns me that the person perpetrating violence, etc., stays possibly with children and the woman is forced to leave. Now, what message does that send to the children, especially if they were young boys who think dad's great and I follow in his footsteps? Thank you.
Councillor Churchman, you're absolutely right, and I'm sure Laura will bring some more specifics. It's what we're trying to change on the island. So actually we want to have safe spaces for, as you say, mainly women to stay with their families and the perpetrator moves away, which is why Lisa's really carefully articulated some of the options available to the police, such as orders to prevent access. You're right, it does need to change, and we are moving forward on that journey. Laura, anything specific you want to add on that?
Yeah, I think we are probably working in a kind of environment where we're looking to reverse many decades of very well-intentioned but unintentionally victim blaming practice and policy. And I think that's why we've come to a point where we've the issue you've raised. There are a number of actions within our community commissioned services that do support predominantly women to stay in their own home. So, for example, services will go in and complete target hardening, and that may include door wedges, extra alarm, extra security, etc. Interestingly, we have completed a process called a near miss review recently, and one of the recommendations and findings is to look further into the options available for people, victims, to stay in their own home. We know that in the Scandinavian countries, there's accommodation in the same way that victims are moved into refuges. There is accommodation for perpetrators, and interventions are delivered. So there are models out there, quite innovative models, but they're very limited in their application and evidence base thus far.
Councillor Redrup.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the presentation. My question is for Lisa. What steps are Hampshire and Constabulary taking since the release of the Angelini report in February, and what they expect to have come out of the second report as well? Thank you.
So I can't comment on that because that's not something I've been directly involved with, but I can certainly take that question back and ask Force colleagues to report on that.
Yes, please. Thank you. Councillor Lever.
Thank you. Sorry if this was already answered in what we just spoke about, but just interested in what work has been done with schools around education on these issues. Concerned recently reports and even TV programmes now about the impact of misogynistic influences on young boys and the consequence for young girls and others.
If I start off.
Yes, sorry. Yes, please do.
So just to set out, we have a program called Peach, which is our work around health and education working together. And that, as you say, that starts off really early, thinking about sex and relationships education, good friendships, and all those kind of things as building blocks for good relationships in children and young people. And then that builds up with some more in-depth work we can do with the services going into schools as appropriate and supporting really good relationships. As you say, it's a kind of a whole system and a societal change that's required. We'll provide training for schools as needed, working with the Director of Education. And also there is a program of work where if a child is experiencing abuse called Operation Encompass, the school is informed the next day so they know how to support that child in that very difficult situation immediately.
Yeah, thank you. I noticed on the previous agenda item, I don't want to sort of conflate crime statistics, but a lot of crime being perpetrated by people under 25. 25-year-old is not that far out of education, so I think the role of education is obviously key. Any other contributions? Councillor Lucioni.
Lisa may know this. I cannot remember the name of the project, but the Police and Crime Commissioner has given money to, is it high schools, for a project where it's like peer-to-peer, you know, chasing social norms. So you can speak to if you're being treated, you know, misogynistically or whatever, but actually they call out each other. So changing social norms, and it's worked really well.
Is that the Choices programme, Karen?
Karen says yes. Yeah.
Yes, Lisa. That I couldn't remember the name, but I went to see it with Donna Jones, and it was really good, and the children have really enjoyed it too.
Yeah, I don't know, Lisa. Is there anything you wanted to add to that? What Councillor Lucioni's just said. That Choices programme.
Yeah, so it's been funded through the Violence Reduction Unit, and it's it's aimed at year 6s and 7s, and it's about, yeah, as Karen said, going into schools and educating on a range of things, but around, you know, healthy relationships, misogynistic behaviour, how to challenge that, how to get support. So it's a range of things, and I can share further information for anyone that's interested.
Thank you. Are there any other, Councillor Redrup?
Thank you. My question is for Simon and for Laura. I note that on the slide, one of the key principles for the coordinated community response model is survivor voice. What are the mechanisms for gathering that and for using that within assessing how things are working and informing choices going forward?
I'm going to start off in general principles. It's absolutely central to what we want to do in all our work, and we recognise that survivors aren't just in our domestic abuse services listening to those people who are in our services, but in all other services, asking partners to ensure that they listen, and that's fed back through the development of our strategy and our work. So absolutely central to what we're doing. Laura.
Yeah, so the needs assessment that we undertook last year was very much based on the victim survivor voice. We went out and did qualitative and quantitative work with victim survivor forums. We went to the refuge to speak to residents. We held focus groups within the community and one-to-one interviews, and that needs assessment has informed both our strategy and our commissioning specification. In addition, the Domestic Abuse Partnership Board has developed a survivor voice workstream, which is currently just underway, so you'll probably start to see information coming out about that, and adverts almost, if you like, for people to join that group, so that they will be able to give their voice to shape the work of the board, and also to kind of support the development of services.
Councillor Redrup.
Sorry, just a follow-up question. That sounds fantastic. I think that's really great. So you mentioned about the needs assessment. Is there any data from that that's available for people to view?
Yes, we can provide you with our partner presentation.
Yes, please. Thank you.
I'm looking around the room. I don't think there's any further comments or questions from in the room. Thank you very much, all three of you on screen, for being present and being able to give us that comprehensive report and take our questions. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
In which case, that brings us to item 13, members' question time. And there appear to be no questions, in which case I will... there is a question. Councillor Jarman.
Thank you, Chair. I was just giving the chance to the committee members to ask those first, being very polite. So the question I have is, and he's not here this evening, so I appreciate that, and I'll take a written answer on this. Will the Cabinet Member for Finance please confirm when the multiple consultations agreed in the budget amendment at full council in February for a local residential facility for high needs children, relocatable homes, etc., will be available? Thank you.
Can you provide with the text of that? Yeah, thank you. Which I think brings us to the end of the meeting. Thank you very much indeed for attending.